take time. I want you to listen to what they say. I want you to analyze their question, their answers, and ensure that they are in line with the things that we believe here in Prince William County. We believe here in Prince William County. Okay, one of the things that we've seen over the past couple of years as it relates to politics is character matters. Character matters. And for the past 4 years, maybe 8 years or so, we watch our political system, and the character of individuals will blow your mind. And that is because we haven't been doing our civic duty. We haven't been here. We haven't been watching. We haven't been questioning. We haven't been doing the things that we do. Well, that's what we're doing today. That's what we're starting to do today. Okay, so again, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to all of you that have taken your time to come here. I would like to give a hand to the Outreach Committee and the Communications Committee that had worked tirelessly to put this event on. So, the Outreach Committee, Kim Shaw, raise your hand. Okay. The Communications Committee, my lovely wife standing back there, raise your hand. I want to say, and anybody else that's been working with them, thank you very much for all of the hard work that you have been doing to ensure that we are having the event that we're having today. Now, I'm going to take a couple of seconds, just a couple of seconds, because it ain't about me, to introduce our moderators. Now, I want everybody to know our moderators. Our moderators are Ms. Jill Ferlazzo, who is the managing editor for the Prince William County Times and the Fakir Time, and then also Asim Ghafoor. Right, Asim Ghafoor is a civil rights attorney out of D.C., and he's been working with a lot of organizations, nonprofit organizations, on politics and also civil rights advocacy. Both of these individuals have done these forums before. They know how to do it, and that's why we asked them to come here. So, having said that, I'm about to exit the stage now, and I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Palermo and Mr. Ghafoor, so you guys got it. The floor is yours. Again, thanks everyone for coming out.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, candidates, for coming, and thank you, the audience from Prince William County Democrats and the community. I just have a very few rules. Each candidate has received these, each candidate has apparently signed these, and I want the audience to know, no candidate knows the questions we will be asking. They've only been given the topics. And I'd just like to remind the candidates and the audience, this is not a debate, it's a forum, so we do not expect any interruptions, either from the audience or the candidates interrupting each other. We hope that you will treat each other with dignity and respect, and we want to know that the timekeepers here on the side will be enforcing the 1-minute opening statements, which is a change from the rules. We're adding a 1-minute opening statement for each of you. And the order for the opening statements, the order for each question has already been randomly decided. And Jill and I will be informing you at each question who will be speaking first.
Good afternoon. Yes, thanks to all of you for joining us. We're going to start, as Asim said, with opening statements. And our first candidate to give the opening statement will be candidate Margaret Franklin. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you to the moderators, and thank you to the Prince William County Democratic Committee for hosting today's forum. I am Supervisor Margaret Franklin. I currently sit on the Prince William Board of Supervisors representing the Woodbridge District, and I am running for the 7th Congressional District. I am running for the 7th Congressional because I understand the challenges that working families face. Many of you have heard my story about growing up in a single-parent household with my mother passed away from cancer when I was 8 years old, and my father raising my sister and I. I understood the challenges that he faced with regards to healthcare costs, and so I'm running because I understand how to get things done in Congress. Spent 8 years as a staffer on Capitol Hill, and I've been now in my second term as supervisor. Created the Child Advocacy Center, leading on affordable housing, created a housing trust fund that we're going to fund at $25 million over the next few years. So when we talk about experience, I have that, but more importantly, I've been effective, and I'm happy to talk with each of you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Andrea Bailey.
Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you very much. To the moderators, thank you for being here, and to the Prince William County Dems, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I am Supervisor Andrea Bailey, serving my second term on the Board of County Supervisors, and I'm also a Congressional District 7 candidate. I am excited about running for this race because as an inner city kid from St. Louis, Missouri, I've developed my democratic values, my people values from watching my grandmother in a voting walking people from the neighborhood to vote. I've watched my mother advocate for education for inner city kids. And with the experience that I bring as a corporate citizen, a veteran's wife, I believe that my leadership is needed in Congress right now. And so I'm excited about running for the seat because our democracy is at hand. And I believe that I can go to Washington and help our delegation that's there now to just stop focusing on dysfunctionality, but serving the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate will be candidate Briana Sewell.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am Delegate Briana Sewell, and I proudly represent the 25th District in the House of Delegates. And I'm running to be your next Congresswoman. At a time such as this, we need someone who understands the needs of our community. And we also need someone who, during this time of deep divide, is actually able to be effective and to listen to the needs of the district. That's what I've dedicated my career to doing. I have a commitment to being of service, and that is deeply instilled in me as a daughter of 2 Air Force veterans and the granddaughter of an individual who was a foot soldier in the Civil Rights Movement. Together, we have the ability to get so much done together. And I know that a lot of that is going to come from being able to listen to the needs of this district. So as we continue to have this forum today, I look forward to sharing my views and perspectives on a host of issues, and I look forward to the opportunity to engage with each of you after this forum. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. And the next candidate we'll hear from is candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Good afternoon, Prince William County Democrats. I am Elizabeth Guzman. 25 years ago, I would have not imagined to have a successful career in local government in Virginia and running to become your representative. I got here with $300 in my pocket and a little girl, and I juggled 3 jobs like many immigrants, like many Americans do. With the support of my family, today I have 2 master's degrees, one in public administration, another one in social work. I started getting involved by pushing back 287G that was profiling people who look like my family and I. And I did not only lead the effort to repeal it, but I helped unseat every Republican who voted for it. In 2016, my son Carlos told me that we have to go back to Peru. And I said, no, I'm gonna run for office to protect our American dream and freedoms. And with that, I flipped my district red to blue after 26 years by double digits. And when I got to Richmond, I introduced over 100 pieces of legislation, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from candidate Eugene Vindman.
Thank you, moderators. Thank you, Prince William County Dems. My name is Eugene Vindman. I'm a husband, a father, a vet, and an immigrant. I spent 25 years in the Army. I'm a former Army colonel. And my family and I came to prominence during the first impeachment of Donald Trump. Alex listened to the phone call. He reported to me. I was the ethics officer, and we reported up the chain. Because we strongly believed our family values, our Army values, that no one is above the law. This campaign is about values. This week we watched the start of Donald Trump's trial, and I had to sit, my daughter was getting ready for school, and I had to explain to her that one of the two candidates is actually somebody that we're, paid hush money. So this is about the direction of this country and values. There are lots of important issues. We're at a crossroads, and I think I'm the right candidate to represent the 7th Congressional District. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. And the next candidate we'll hear from is Clifford Heinzer.
Well, thank you, Prince William County, for coming out on this rainy afternoon. I'm Cliff Heinzer, and I'm running for Congress because I dedicated my life to service. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood, but I studied hard, and after I graduated from Cornell, I joined the Army, first as an infantry officer, then in the Special Forces as a Green Beret. After the Army, I joined the Foreign Service, and I gained experience there, sharpened my negotiating skills, and mastered Middle East policy, immigration, border security, and also addiction treatment. I'm looking for your support. I'm looking for your support in this coming election. After the service, I was able to join the executive committee of my local NAACP. I also served as the chair of the Stafford County Democratic Committee. And I've knocked on thousands of doors for local candidates. Thank you. Hope I can get your support.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from candidate Carl Bedell.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Carl Bedell. I have a pretty simple story that goes back to the Revolutionary War. My family has served in nearly every conflict. When I finished college, I joined the Army. I became an intelligence officer, and I worked for NATO. And after my military service, I went to law school. I started representing veterans, and for my entire career, I've served either our nation or people in need. I decided about 2 years ago that I had had enough of the obstructionism that I was seeing in Congress, the lack of civility, and the lack of character. We need people in Congress that have honesty, integrity, and they're for the right reasons, and that is why I stood up and I'm running for this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
We were just noting that for us, the lights are really blinding, so we're trying to talk amongst ourselves to see if there's a way that we could potentially push the table back a little bit or turn down the lights a little.
Okay, we're gonna
I don't like being in the light.
ask our organizers or logistics people if they can address that.
Ooh. Okay, there's a happy middle ground here.
How about there? Is that good? Okay, good. We don't want to blind you, so we're glad you said something. That's good. Okay, so we're going to move on to our questions. Our candidates have received our topic areas, but not our specific questions. And I do want to let you know that the questions came from the Democratic Committee. And we were given the questions, so that's where they're coming from. And first of all, we're just going to ask the most basic question, right? Why are you the most qualified candidate to represent the voters of the 7th District? Please elaborate on some past achievements that are important to the residents of the 7th District. And once again, you're going to answer in this random order. And starting with this question will be candidate Carl Bedell. 2 minutes. Sorry, you have 2 minutes to answer, but if you don't need it all, you don't have to take it all.
Great. So my background is pretty diverse. I'm a small business owner, I'm a veteran, I've served our country, I've served on county and state boards on veterans issues, and I think that background and breadth of service and experience is important when you come to Congress. Importantly, in this election, is we need someone that is able to win this district, and this district is very diverse. It spans from where we are right now in Prince William County all the way west to the shadows of the Shenandoah National Park. It's got 8 counties in it that are rural, and those votes in the rural districts, the moderate votes or the swing votes that Abigail Spanberger was able to win, and was able to win because she speaks to those people. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for 19 years, in Arlington for 11 before I moved out to Greene County, which is on the furthest west county of our district. I am constantly around the farmers, the people in the rural districts that are going to vote, that are going to make the votes that will win and will decide this election. That is why I think that I am the most qualified candidate to win in the general election, and that's what we need. We need to keep this seat blue so we can flip the House and so we can have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic President.
Thank you. And next, moving on to candidate Eugene Vindman.
So, I've had a lifetime of experience in service. I have a diverse background. My family emigrated to the United States. I was 3 years old when we left, 4 years when we got here. Between the five of us, we had $759. We were not productive members of society when our family got here. A middle-aged man, 3 kids, and elderly woman. This country took a chance on us. We are a product of the American dream. And when we were old enough, my brothers, all of us, joined the military. I had a profound sense of gratitude. So I bring the immigrant experience. I bring the experience of having grown up with very modest means, but in a loving household. I bring 25 years of military experience. I've been a prosecutor. I've been an advisor to commanders in the field in Iraq. Lloyd Austin, when he was commander of U.S. Forces Iraq. I've served at the White House. I understand the federal government. I understand the law as an attorney. And I've been tested. And what I've found over the course of the last 4.5 months of this career is that the people of this district are looking for leaders of values. Folks that have been tested, that have experience, that have a skill set, but that have been tested in the greatest way possible. And for us, for me and my twin brother, is standing up to the commander-in-chief when we're active duty military officers. So I bring that experience, and then I also bring the experience of a human rights lawyer. After I retired, I spent a year and a half in Ukraine investigating war crimes, 14 trips between June of 22 to October of last year. These are the experiences that I believe the voters of the 7th District desire. Thank you.
Okay, our next candidate is candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you very much. I believe that I have the DNA to run for this office, and I'm going to tell you why. I was raised in a single-parent home 4 generations. And in that home, I learned about the importance of having your vote as your voice. I learned that from my grandmother, who would walk citizens to the voting booth when she was not able to vote. And as a result of that, I took that foundation and brought it to Northern Virginia, where I registered 10,000 people here in this region to make sure that their voice was heard. I believe that the DNA that I have in my servanthood is being a veteran's wife, where my husband and I serve nationally and internationally, understanding the needs of the veterans in this region. And Abigail Spanberger has laid that platform for whoever goes into the seat to continue that. So that's important. I believe that I have the DNA because I, as a corporate citizen, I know how to manage budgets, and I've also worked with, from a legislative standpoint, with the legislation that we have in Congress right now. They've mentored me. I've sat at tables, panels with Abigail Spanberger, Senator Warner and Kane, Congressman Connolly, and I've also had a bipartisan vote for a project here in Prince William County for mental health, the Crisis Receiving Center, where we brought $16 million here for mental health. I believe that I have the DNA for this seat because I have a heart of servanthood, and not to go to the seat to be popular or to be just a politician, but an elected official here to serve all the people in this region. And then lastly, I believe that I have the DNA because I've worked with Abigail Spanberger in this region, from Prince William County to Caroline County, to know and understand the level of service that's needed. So that's why I'm running for this office, and that's why I believe that I have the DNA to go to Congress to represent you.
Thank you. And the next candidate we'll hear from is candidate Briana Sewell.
Thank you.
At a time such as this, we need a proven leader, and that is me. I have spent the past 15 years committed to telling the stories of community and the community that I represent. I've worked at the local, state, and federal levels of government. I began my career by working for Congressman Connolly as his Prince William District Director, where I worked with federal agencies every day to make sure that we were meeting the needs of our community, and that anyone who came through the door had those issues addressed in a timely fashion. I worked at the local level of government to make sure that we had a vision and understanding of where we had come as a community, but more importantly, to help paint that vision forward. And now, as a state delegate, I have been recognized nationally as one of the 20 most effective state legislators under the age of 40 because of my willingness to listen and to get to work and get things done. I've passed paid family and medical leave at the state level. I have pushed and assisted my colleagues with passing gun violence prevention bills. I have stood up to claim sharks to ensure that our veterans have their hard-earned benefits protected. I have worked to protect our environment. I have made sure that we have invested in mental health.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to bring my professional experience. I worked in local government in Virginia for over 20 years, in early childhood education, school administration, and the last 10 years in mental health on the front lines fighting the opioid and fentanyl crisis. But also, I'm the candidate with the most experience in legislative office. I served in the General Assembly for 6 years. And I am the only candidate who have flipped a district red to blue by double digits. So I know how to win swing districts. I not only did it once, but I did it 3 times. And the district for all of us who campaign for Abigail Spanberger, we know that this district is extremely competitive. And the district is 35% rural. It includes 11 localities. And I'm the only candidate who have represented rural areas in Richmond for the last 6 years. We talk about a lot of effectiveness, but I am proud to say that I've been named an effective legislator by the Washington Post, the Richmond Times, the League of Conservation Voters, the Virginia Education Association, and more. The pieces of landmark legislation that I have introduced that I author is collective bargaining for public sector employees, helping Virginia to become the 49th state in the country, paid sick leave, mental health, more school counselors for elementary school, middle schools, higher schools. I led the effort for the state to be the first investor for the Crisis Resilience Center in Prince William County. And of course, the district has a huge population of military families and veterans, and I have multiple pieces of legislation that have improved the life of military families and veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from candidate Clifford Heinzer.
I grew up in a working class neighborhood at a time when a full-time job earned a living wage, which meant you could pay for a mortgage, 2 cars, and put your kids through college. We need to bring the economy back to that. In the Army, as an officer in the infantry, I learned leadership, and in the Special Forces of the Green Beret, I learned about insurgency and militancy. It's very helpful now when I have to look and analyze what's actually going on in the Middle East. But in the Department of State, I spent 20 years negotiating across the table from enemies and allies, and I learned how to strike a deal, how to find common ground, how to move forward even though our positions seem so far apart. I also gained expertise on the Middle East, on addiction treatment. I've issued tens of thousands of immigrant visas, and I was the U.S. border coordinator for Afghanistan for a year. So I know what we need to do to secure our southern border. Because I wanted to work on the issue of inequality, I left the Foreign Service. And there, I served on the executive committee of my local NAACP. I was chair of my local Democratic committee, and I've been to thousands of doors supporting local candidates, including Abigail Spanberger. So I believe that as we're facing this potentially very tough general election in November, and we know that the lead candidate right now on the Republican side sells himself mainly as, I'm a former Green Beret, I would offer to you that if that is the case, we could respond by saying, well, we have one too. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from candidate Margaret Franklin.
Thank you. As mentioned in my opening statement, I've spent 8 years as a staffer on Capitol Hill in both the House and the Senate, working on voting rights legislation, working on legislation to help small businesses, working on legislation to actually protect and expand women's health care. And that alone lends to the experience of serving as a member of Congress. I will also say that as my term on the Board of Supervisors, again, I've led the effort to create more affordable housing here in this region. Recently created the Housing Trust Fund, which we voted to fund to the tune of $25 million over the next several years. And one of my first acts as a member of the Board of Supervisors was creating a child advocacy center to help victims of child abuse, which recently won an award from the Virginia Association of Counties. And the last thing I'll just say is with regards to public safety. I've led the effort to reduce gun violence on the Route 1 corridor. We cleaned up the Longview 7-Eleven. We essentially have 0 service calls now to the police department from the Potomac Inn Motel. I've worked on these issues. I've been effective on these issues. And more important than experience, I think, is how effective someone can be on day one. And I believe that I can be that person. Thank you.
Been randomly selected is Mr. Clifford Heinzer.
I think there are 2 things we have to do. The first is we need to pass the Women's Health Protective Act. Because, and I think, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but we all pretty much agree that we have to enshrine in federal law a woman's right to choose. But I also want to say that alone may not be enough. Because we've seen with the current Supreme Court that there is some uncertainty. So much so, when we look at recent court decisions, there's a question about, I think in a lot of people's mind, about how legitimate the court is perceived to be or not perceived to be. So to assure that we do not have further problems down the road with a court that is leaning in one political direction, in addition to putting into law a woman's right to choose, we also need to make some reforms to the court. And I would propose the first thing we need to do is cap the term for Supreme Court Justice at 18 years. The problem we have now with the life terms is that, as we've seen, through very effective, actually, Republican action, they've managed to get a supermajority. And to fix that, we've got to make sure that the court actually reflects the American people, not the ideas of one party. And we can achieve that if we put in a term limit, limiting the justices to 18 years. So I think those 2 things are what we have to do, and they're both legislative actions. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Heinzer. If any candidate needs me to repeat the question, I'm happy to do that. It will not count against your time. The next person to answer, next candidate is candidate Margaret Franklin.
Thank you for that. Well, the first thing that needs to happen is we need a Democratic House and Senate. So we need to obviously take over the majority in the House, and we need to expand our majority in the Senate if we're going to be serious about protecting and expanding women's reproductive health. We've seen the challenges, obviously, with the Supreme Court. We've seen the challenges with having a Senate that only has a majority by a very, very tight margin. Essentially can't get anything done, whether it's voting rights or women's reproductive health. And so we need to make sure that we can take control of both houses. Once in control of both houses, it is absolutely true we have to codify legislation that will allow us not to only protect women's reproductive health, but to expand it. I also like to talk about this in the context of healthcare. This is a healthcare discussion. When we talk about women's reproductive right, we're not just talking about abortion rights. We're talking about making sure that women have access to certain types of medications that can help with all types of issues that can impact their health care. And so we have to stop contextualizing it in just one sense and make sure that we're talking about it in a sense of health care all around. So this is an important issue. We've been talking about it for years. This Roe v. Wade has been the law of the land for decades, and the idea that it will be stripped away because of a conservative Supreme Court, quite frankly, is disconcerting. Thank you.
Candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you very much. As we go about securing the House and the Senate in Congress, once that is solidified in these campaigns, what we need to do is not go back. We need not to go back by codifying Roe versus Wade. That's the bottom line. And we also need to write legislation that not only focuses on secured health care, but across the board, civilian and veterans health care. So that's something, as a veteran's wife, I'll be working on that as well in terms of legislation. I had an experience as a military wife where, as a veteran's wife, an officer's wife, with a health issue, I was ignored and not given the specific health care that I needed. And so I realized that that is an opportunity for us to really become all-encompassing when you talk about health care in Congress. It's very important when we talk about health care that we have a vision that is not insular, that it is a wide vision. And the vision that encompasses not just health care, but mental health care as well. And so my focus will be on codifying Roe versus Wade, absolutely. I grew up in an era where we thought it was all right. We cannot go back. And we must focus on our children's health care, where we need to focus on making sure that when it's time for kids as a child, when I got shots as a single parent child, my mom didn't have to pay for it. But there are people that need, younger mothers that need health care and taking care of their children where they just can't afford it. So my legislation will be focused not on just codifying Roe versus Wade, but an expansive view on health care in its entirety.
Candidate Bedell.
Great. So we've been working on this issue for a while, and this week I was working with my team, and I saw a meme that a lot of you may have seen. It's a boardroom full of dogs, and it says it's the Committee on Feline Health. Well, that's kind of how this is. I mean, we don't need government telling women what they need to do or what they can and can't do with their bodies or their healthcare decisions. It's not the government's place. Every woman should have the right to make their own decision, and we need to make sure that that right is codified in law. Now, I disagree with Cliff saying that we need to put term limits on Supreme Court justices. While that might be needed, that would take a constitutional amendment. We can hardly agree on passing legislation for anything, let alone the constitutional amendment. So we need to focus on making sure that we have the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate so we can codify the women's rights to health care and not have to worry about the conservative courts that we are going to continue to have for a long time based on the Republican Party's strategy that goes back decades, about packing courts with conservative justices. We have to have a Congress that votes Democratic, that stands up for every woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. Thank you.
Candidate Liz Guzman.
Okay, thank you for the question, as this issue is personal to me, as I'm the only mom with 3 daughters here. So my promise is that I will fight with tooth and nail, and we should, nobody has to get involved in our personal medical decisions. When I was serving in Richmond during the year 2020, we ensured that Virginia stayed to be the safe haven for abortion in the South. And we are proud to be the only state in the southern region, and that we are able to provide those services, not only to Virginians, but we expanded to those border states that they need access to. Why? Because women's reproductive rights are human rights, and abortion care is health care. One important thing that we did in Richmond as well was just to be proactive, and we created the Maternity Mortality Review Board, where we look at the disproportionality when Black women die at higher rates compared to other women. But when we will be at the federal government, we are not I've seen a lot of studies going on for every single issue that is important to us. But we need to further, we need to be held accountable, and we need to use that information from those studies and putting them to work. Yes, we need to codify Roe v. Wade. Why it's important? Because once we put it in the Constitution, it's not gonna be up to any legislator or representative to put it out. But we need to go beyond, and we need to put federal protections for IVF and birth control. Another thing that I did in Richmond was to introduce a budget amendment that provided maternity care to undocumented immigrants. That money was available from the federal government, and I was able to work with Delegate Torian, the Chair of Appropriations, where we not only invested, but actually the federal government gave us a reward for participating in this program. So that's what we have to do.
Thank you. Candidate Eugene Vindman.
So I'm the father of a 13-year-old girl. For 25 years, I fought to defend American freedoms, both at home and abroad. And we're now seeing those freedoms rolled back. So the first thing I would do is to codify, restore Roe, and pass the Women's Health Protection Act. I want to make sure my daughter has the same rights that her mother enjoyed, that women have fought for years. The other thing is, abortion is really the first thing on the chopping block. We've seen IVF is next. It's already threatened in states like Alabama. And frankly, contraception. So my twin brother's daughter was born as a result of IVF. She is a miracle in many ways, and she's fantastic, and I love her, frankly, as much as my own daughter, because I guess technically, genetically, she's my half-daughter, since we're twins. In any case, and we have to protect IVF, contraception, and we also have to be cognizant of the fact that, you know, there are issues with Black mortality, and there's a bill called the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act. This is actually a group of 13 bills that are meant to equalize health treatment for women of color, and I would support both of those. So thank you for that question. It's very important.
Thank you. Candidate Briana Sewell.
There we go. During the State of the Union, President Biden noted if he has sent a pro-choice Congress, that he will enshrine Roe v. Wade into law, and I look forward to helping with that process. Once we keep this seat blue and ensure that we take back control of the House and the Senate. And with that, it is exceptionally important that we also note that in addition to noting a woman's right to choose, we also need to address the disproportionate life expectancies for the birth that have impacted so many communities, whether it's minority communities or our rural communities, and recognizing access to healthcare. And the Omnibus Act does that, but it also goes beyond just simply addressing disparities in birth outcomes. It also affords states the ability to ensure that doulas are covered by state insurance, and that is something that we've done here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I look forward to putting into place at the federal level. I also just want to note that abortion opponents in general are playing politics with our bodies and our lives, and since they can't win in the court of public opinion, they have turned to the Supreme Court, and we've noticed that once again this week with EMTALA. And we have to understand that this is going to impact all of us, and everyone deserves emergency medical care, and that includes an abortion.
Thank you. Okay, with our third question, we're going to move on to the topic of combating climate change and saving our planet. And just very simply, what specific legislation or policies would you recommend to reduce carbon use and emissions and improve our water quality? And for this question, we're going to start with our candidate, Elizabeth Guzman.
Thank you. Well, I would like to start first by saying that I've been recognized for my job of protecting the environment at the state legislature by the League of Conservation Voters as a legislative leader and getting A+ ratings by the Sierra Club every year. And I would say that President Biden has been the most effective pro-environment president in this country. However, he definitely needs the support of the House and in order to get those ideas through. But one of the things that we have to bring to this office is accountability and transparency and use our collective power. Because what happens is the money is gonna come to the state. And when we have a Republican governor, we have to hold them accountable to make those investments as President Biden desires. So for example, when we had the infrastructure money that was in for protect the environment, to improve public transportation and investments in solar farms, the governor was sitting on that money. And so we have to call him out and tell him that that is money for infrastructure, and unfortunately, he's been using that money to patch potholes rather than protecting the environment. But when we look at the environment, in order to go 100% renewables and protect our clean air and water, and before I forget, I was the legislator who passed the landmark piece of legislation that will highlight PFOAs and PFAS, so we can protect our drinking water. It's important that we fight for 100% renewables. I was proud in order to have the successes in the legislature, not to take money from utility companies. Because if we're gonna hold them accountable, it's extremely important that we're not gonna be biased when we make those decisions.
Candidate Clifford Heinzer.
Well, the first thing I would recommend is that we not wait until part of tidal Virginia is underwater to decide to do something. And we all know that while we have solid measures now under the Biden administration to try to control the flow of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we also had a year in which, despite all of the Republican propaganda, we pumped more oil out of the ground than any year previously in the US. That isn't necessarily a good thing, because we need to begin that orderly transition to renewables, solar, wind, other power sources. And you, right here in Prince William, are facing part of this challenge, right? Because just as we're talking about the need to protect the climate, we're also seeing more data centers coming in, which are very power hungry. And the bottom line is that power still has to come from somewhere. And the easy default, which worries, I think, so many of us, is that it's going to be fossil fuels, and we're going to see more, not less, coal being used to generate power to supply these data centers. That's something we have to avoid. Another issue I want to mention, though, is in addition to the problems of putting these toxic gases into the atmosphere, we also have a solid waste issue. How many people want to build more trash mountains? And you see it right here in Prince William. We have it throughout the district. We've got to also come to grips with this with our solid waste issue. Move to things that are sustainable. Because at a certain point, we're going to run out of space. I think that some of the concerns that we've seen expressed recently about a too rapid move to electric vehicles and other things that will help move us in the right direction, I think we don't need to be distracted by that, and that we do need to focus on preserving the environment and the climate while we still can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Candidate Margaret Franklin.
Thank you for that. I'll just start by saying that the actual number one sustainability issue here in Prince William County are the forever chemicals that are being leaked into our water systems. So that should be the focus here in Prince William County, which we are focused on, in which we've been working with the state, particularly with regards to the Occoquan watershed, to remediate because of some of the companies that are not data centers that have actually been flowing into our water systems. So just want to correct the record on that. I'll also just say that in terms of my record on sustainability issues, I actually led the effort to create the Sustainability Commission, which has been in existence, I think, for a year and a half now, and also supported the effort to create the Office of Sustainability, which we have now for the first time here in Prince William County. So those are efforts that I actually have been able to be part of locally. In terms of federal legislation, we've seen the Inflation Reduction Act, which has several provisions that provide for energy tax credits that companies can use as a way to incentivize them to do more sustainability work in local communities. That's one thing that we need to make sure that we are supporting and expanding if we take Congress. In addition to that, we need to make sure that we're focusing on environmental justice. A lot of neighborhoods across the country, and even here in Prince William County, we've seen the challenges of Dominion and the work that they've done in certain parts of our districts in terms of our water quality and some of the chemicals that have been flowing through our water systems in the Potomac River. We have to focus on environmental justice and making sure that we have legislation that can prevent those type of issues, and also making sure that we're working with companies to remediate some of those issues. We know a lot more about sustainability today than we have in the past, and companies know a lot more today than they have in the past, and we need to make sure that we're holding them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Eugene Vindman.
So I think there are two approaches. There's certainly one for national policy and international policy, but there's also a personal one. One of the things I like to enjoy doing living in this community is we have a beautiful Neabsco boardwalk, we have the Prince William National Forest, and my family spent a lot of time outdoors. One of the things that we've done with my son for years now is we've cleaned up the Neabsco boardwalk, the watershed, the swamps. So I think there's an element of personal responsibility that we actually have to model that's important. As far as national and international policy, I think we continue to support wind power, solar power, tidal power, and frankly, there's a role for nuclear power. I think clean nuclear power has advanced really dramatically over the course of the last many decades. And one of the things I was privileged to do at the White House is I was the deputy legal advisor, not only for ethics and other things, but also for emerging technology. So there's a significant role for emerging technology. We have to leverage these things. We have to make sure that we protect our environment, frankly, for our kids and grandkids. The environment and the climate is in jeopardy. We see it and feel it every passing year. So, thank you.
Candidate Carl Bedell.
So, I think the question was what we would do in Congress, and I think that every piece of legislation that passes in Congress that has any kind of environmental impact, either directly or indirectly, needs to have standards that ensures the environment is taken into consideration. We have to do that from a federal level. We also need to fund and encourage innovation. As we become a more technologically advanced society, every one of us probably has a smartphone in our pocket. We become more reliant on data centers and technology hubs that require a vast amount of energy. Because of that, we've seen fossil fuel usage increase for the first time in decades, and we're on an upward trajectory. And the reality is that clean fuels, clean energy with modern technology cannot keep pace with the energy demands we have as a technologically advanced society. And so we have to spur and fund innovation so that private companies develop the technology that uses less energy, that makes cleaner energy more efficient, so we can stop relying on fossil fuels. If we don't do that, we're going to continue to burn through fossil fuels. We're going to continue to pump more oil out of the ground, rely on fracking and shale. So we've got to make sure that we invest in clean energy technology and encourage companies that are developing those technologies to do it in a more efficient, effective way that has a lesser impact on our environment.
Thank you. And candidate Briana Sewell.
Climate change is an emergency, and it is long past time for us to take some serious action. I was honored to attend President Biden's Earth Day announcement earlier this week, where he announced $7 billion that would be invested in the Solar for All program, and the launch of the American Climate Corps. With the $7 billion that was invested in the Solar for All program, $150 million of that is going to come right here to the Commonwealth of Virginia to provide solar panels on the roofs of homes for residents who identify as low income or live in a particularly hard-hit community. And this will, one, not only lower their particular energy bills, but it will also provide jobs, improve the health of the community, and hope and opportunities that are essentially needed at this moment right now. But continuing on those efforts, we must invest in clean energy sources. We must reapply back into RGGI. We did so at the state level this year. The governor has vetoed that effort, and we are going to do our best to get back into that as we continue to fight for the state budget at this moment in time. And we will also continue to reduce emissions for electric sector, and this revenue, again, is going to go back to serving those who are most in need at this time. And it will also enhance our community flood mitigation and prevention efforts, which is something that the residents of the 7th District all across it are relying upon. And Abigail Spanberger has been a big champion of, and I look forward to continuing those efforts in Congress.
Candidate Andrea Bailey.
I believe that this is an opportunity where we introduce equity as we move forward with preserving our environment and sustaining our environment. As I am working with big business like Dominion Energy in my district, I've learned so much about how we are not preserving our land and how things like coal ash has been infused in our waters and contaminated our waters and contaminated our communities. So I think when we talk about environment and sustainability, it's an opportunity for us to introduce more programs to help the community to understand what equity means as it relates to environment and sustainability. That looks like, for me, as I go to Congress, developing programs that will offer funding to preserve the community, where there are hotspots, teaching those communities that don't understand hotspots, what it means to preserve their communities. So I think it's an opportunity that we look at, because environment and sustainability, we dropped the ball on that. We dropped the ball for about 30 years on that. And so as we go to Congress, as I go to Congress, this will be an opportunity for me to partner more with my state officials, with my federal colleagues, to make sure that those programs, that funding that we have from Congress is filtered down to our communities to improve, to preserve, to clean up our waters. That's what it looks like for me as I go to Congress. And so social justice and equity and all of that, as I sit on the Council of Government boards, that is important, that we make sure that we educate our communities as we are preserving the land.
Thank you. The next topic is safeguarding voting rights. And just so the audience knows and the candidates know, at the end of this forum, you will be given the full questions that the committee had prepared. Don't take pictures. And we welcome your campaigns and the individual candidates to respond, and we'll publicize, just like we're going to be able to publicize this forum. So the fourth topic is safeguarding voting rights. And the first candidate will be Briana Sewell. What specific legislative action will you prioritize to ensure every eligible American can freely exercise their right to vote?
Thank you. The hallmark of any vibrant democracy is unobstructed access to the ballot box. And that is something that I fought for in the General Assembly, and that is something that I'll fight for in Congress. At the federal level, we all know that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 has sadly been gutted. And in particular, Section 2 and Section 5, which are the most important for so many communities. as the daughter of high school sweethearts from Selma, Alabama, and as I noted, the foot soldier of civil rights, as a foot soldier of the civil rights movement, this is personal in so many ways. And the two particular pieces of legislation which I would go to fight for are the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which provides the teeth back to the Voting Rights Act in 1965, as well as the Freedom to Vote Act, which sets a baseline of national standards as far as access to the ballot. And at the state level, what we've been able to do is we've been able to implement the Voting Rights of Virginia, which is what gives you that 45-day of access to the ballot. It's what allows for same-day registration, and it's also what allows for the election day to be considered a state holiday. And the Voting Rights Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, at the federal level provides many of those same parameters, but in particular, it allows for 2 weeks of early voting, and it ensures that there's at least one weekend in which you're able to vote on a Saturday or a Sunday. And I also would like to note that it is also exceptionally important that we as a Commonwealth of Virginia are honest about the importance of restoration of rights. And we continue to be the only state in the nation that says that the restoration of rights to anyone convicted of a felony is a subject of our governor's discretion, and that has to change. And if it takes federal action, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Candidate Andrea Bailey.
Well, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I've worked with former Governor McCullough when he had his initiative of restoring voters' rights to those that were incarcerated in the past. And when we did that, we registered those individuals to vote. I've worked with the League of Conservation Voters, where I led 13 people in this region from Arlington all the way down to the Stafford County line, where we registered 10,212.5, I don't know where the .5 came from, of voters here in this region to vote. But I learned at my grandmother's apron string that voting is your voice. For a woman that didn't have an opportunity to vote in Macon, Mississippi, as she was picking counting, she came to the inner city of St. Louis, Missouri, and taught her neighbors how to go to the voting booth. So this is a privilege in our country, and I don't take it lightly. And so as I don't take it lightly, I respect those voters that vote for me each and every time I run for this seat, because I understand that it's an endorsement of accountability that I have to give back to the citizens in this area. And so I support the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act. Why? Because he almost lost his life to do it. And we must continue to protect our country in that perspective, because the voting process cannot be suppressed, because voting is entirely our voice. It is an engagement that tells Congress, tells any elected official how we want to live and preserve our lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Candidate Margaret Franklin.
Sure, yes, thank you for that. Like my colleague said, obviously support the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act, and also I haven't heard mention For the People Act, that also expands voting rights and voting protections. I'll also say that while I worked for Senator Gillibrand, I actually led the staff effort on voting rights and helping her to introduce the Voter Empowerment Act, which was the companion bill to John Lewis's Voter Empowerment Act in the Senate. So we introduced bicameral bills, and I honestly was an honor to work with Congressman Lewis and his staff to introduce that bill. That particular bill actually expanded voting rights, and it also gave more resources to states on the administrative side in terms of training poll workers and providing additional access for additional same-day voting, additional registration legislation, and that was actually the precursor to what we see now as the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act. So again, have the experience working on these issues, have been committed to these issues, and looking forward to continuing to work on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Next, candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Thank you. Well, we need to support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as part of our voting rights. And I like to tie this to a story, because when I decided to run in 2017, I knocked on thousands of doors and I had conversations. And since we're in Prince William County, 70% of the population live a commute outside for a high-paying job, then many people wasn't participating in the elections, and that was instrumental to me when I flipped my district red to blue. So I had to make them aware. Back then it was early voting with excuse. So when in Richmond we won the majority during the legislative sessions of 2020 and 2021, we fixed that problem. Number one, we decided that nobody needed an excuse to vote early. And why the other side is afraid? Because they want to silence us. They don't want us to participate in the process. So we also passed laws that your children can pre-register to vote when you are 16. So when they turn 18, they don't have to worry about it. We had same-day voter registration. You can vote by mail if you desire to do it, to make it more, to make it easier. But one of the things that we wanted to do is, once we are in Washington, D.C., we need to add more justices to the Supreme Court, because all of our democracy shouldn't be depending on just scholars. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Guzman. Next will be Cliff Heinzer.
There are multiple pieces to what we need to do to safeguard the voting rights of Virginians. The first, as many of you are aware, is that we have to restore all of the protections that were originally in the Voting Rights Act. And I know, as a member of the NAACP, what the consequences are of losing standing based on current court decisions. But the legislative fix to that is fairly straightforward, and we know what we need to do. I'm also concerned, though, about what is actually an orchestrated effort nationwide to deprive many Americans of their voting rights. And the fix to that involves everything from making sure that we properly train and protect poll workers to also outlawing the open display of weapons outside of polling places or near drop boxes, because we're seeing that in some locations, and we've had to actually deal with that in District 7. A larger issue, though, are the tens of millions of Americans who don't actually have a voice because they're living in a gerrymandered district. And as you probably are aware, this year, 89% of the districts are decided in the primary, not the general. So that will leave a vast number of Americans with no real voice. So we've got to fix gerrymandering, we've got to end packing. A first step to that would be introducing independent commissions to oversee redistricting. But there are larger fixes we need to look at, because it's also going to be essential to preserving our democracy and making sure that Americans maintain faith in the democracy that we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candidate Heinzer. Candidate Carlton.
So I agree with what the other candidates have said up here. We have to restore the Voting Rights Act. As a lawyer, I understand how laws are written, I understand how they're interpreted. And I think it's very important not to just focus on those acts that directly impact voting, but we have to make sure that we're addressing those acts that have an indirect impact on people's right and ability to vote. As a democracy, where a small portion of our populace, of our voting, of our eligible voters actually go to vote, we need to do everything we can to make it easier for valid voters to get to the ballot boxes, not more difficult. And so in Congress, I would oppose any legislation that puts limits on how we can get people to the voter box, the ballot box. We need our populace to vote. We need all of you to vote. Our nation is not represented by the people that actually represent us, because not enough of us go and vote on voting day. So please go out and vote. Make sure that you get your neighbors out to vote. We need people to vote. We need people to help others get to the ballot box if you can, but we need to vote. And so any legislation that prohibits that or prevents that or limits it, I would oppose.
Thank you. Candidate Bedell.
So I was motivated to enter this race because I think our democracy is under attack, our rights are under attack. We talked about reproductive rights a few minutes ago, another right that's under attack is voting rights. So I would definitely support the passing of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Right to Vote Act. The John Lewis Act would return us, restore some of the rights that have been removed or attacked by a Supreme Court, that would end discrimination. The Right to Vote Act would actually provide additional protections to Americans and guarantee citizens that any provisions that make it harder for citizens to vote would protect against those. So I support both of those provisions. Thank you.
All right, continuing on that theme of safeguarding voting rights and defending our democracy, our next topic is defending our democracy. And we're going to switch it up a little bit and have two versions of the same question for candidates depending on whether they're currently serving an elected office or not. So we're going to start with the folks who are currently serving an elected office. And the question is, some of you were recently elected to other offices and are now running for Congress. Can you please explain how your pivot to run for a different office demonstrates that your #1 priority is meeting the needs of your constituents? And if elected, how will you ensure that the promises that you made to voters during your previous campaign will be delivered? And for this question, we're going to start out with candidate Margaret Franklin.
Thank you so much for the question. My decision to run for Congress was partly based on the state of my current district. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to run for higher office to the General Assembly when a seat in my district opened up, and I decided not to because I was still concerned with the state of the Woodbridge district. Since then, we've cleaned up the Route 1 corridor. We've invested over $500 million in economic investments into the Route 1 corridor. We've reduced gun violence on the Route 1 corridor. We have a new elementary school coming. I told you about the Child Advocacy Center that's right here in the Ferlazzo building. I am very comfortable with where the Woodbridge district is today, and I'm comfortable enough to serve this district at a higher level. This is not a decision that one should take lightly. This is a federal position. The stakes are much higher. The responsibility in some ways tend to be greater. And when making this decision, you have to make sure that the people that you currently represent are well taken care of. And I'm proud to say that the Woodbridge district is well taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we are moving to candidate Briana Sewell.
Governance is one of those things that it works when you have individuals who can recognize it can be a force for good when you have the right leadership at the helm. And as someone who had no desire to ever run for government or to work in government, it was because of my desire to serve my community which led me into this role and actually led me to running for office, and now has led me to running for Congress. Prince William County is my forever home, and I have been fighting to ensure that everyone who calls this community home feels that their needs are met. When I worked for Congressman Connolly, whether it was a federal issue, a local issue, or a state issue, I have committed to providing assistance in addressing those needs. And if I couldn't personally do it, I made sure to provide that warm handoff. And it's important that whoever serves in any elected office is committed to listening and to providing assistance and transparency and showcasing how government works. And that is something that I commit to every day as a state delegate. So I host candidate meet and greets. I make sure to host bill workshops where all the ideas that I carry as far as the legislation each year in the General Assembly are inspired by the members of the community. And that is reflected in my legislative agenda, and that's the same way that I view the 7th Congressional District. It is important that our leader is someone who is able to listen as well as talk, and it is exceptionally something that I think that I have been able to showcase my strength. I also do want to note, though, that fighting for our democracy and committing to protecting it isn't an item that an individual can do on their own. And I do think that that is exceptionally important. This is an ongoing battle. It's going to be something that evolves over time. This is a constant battle that requires everyone to be engaged. And we need elected leaders who inspire us, who are committed, again, to listening to us, and are willing to allow us to continue with them.
Thank you. And we're moving on to candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you. I appreciate that question very much. As everyone knows, I was the last candidate to get into this race. And I was the last candidate to get in this race because I wanted to make sure that I was making the right decision. The right decision for me is, first of all, my family. Making sure that I had the support from my family, making sure that I'm the caregiver for my mom, make sure my mom was stable, to make sure that everybody in my home was okay with what I'm doing. The other thing that I wanted to do before getting into this race was to make sure, and consulting with those mentors that I talked to you about earlier, that they were in support of what I was doing. And so I talked to all of them, and as a result of that, I got the endorsement from former Governor Ralph Northam and Senator Louise Lucas. Now with that, about my district. The Potomac District is a very historically old district. Nothing had been done in my district for over 25 years. And so what I went about doing in my first term is giving it a lift. The lift is making sure that coal ash was beginning to be cleaned out from the Potomac River. We are doing that with Dominion Energy and the Service Authority, where we spend also in our district $91 million improving infrastructure in the Potomac District that hadn't been done for 20 years. And also what it looks like for me is building economically. We've opened a strip mall on 234 that had been sitting there for over 20 years to be upgraded. And it also looked like Potomac Shores in my district. Nothing had been done. We've just had a ribbon cutting to bring the BRE to the Potomac Shores area, as well as building affordable housing at Potomac Shores and in the district in Triangle. So the Potomac District is humming. It is humming. The last thing that I want to offer you is when you are in politics, there needs to be succession planning. And so I'm going about succession planning within my district. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. We're moving along now to the second part of that question, which is just a little bit different for our folks who are not serving in elected office. The question is, why should voters trust that you will not vacate the office at the first opportunity? And if it is absolutely necessary for you to vacate your seat, what is your plan for ensuring that your promises are delivered? And for that question, we're going first to candidate Clifford Heinzer.
Well, I want to say to you now and answer a question which I occasionally have been asked, which is, if you are elected to office, how long will you serve? And I want to be straightforward that I'm committing to 3 to 4 terms. After that, I think it will be time for a new face to take over. But I will commit to that. And if you look at the experience I've had throughout life, I don't take on easy things, right? It wasn't easy to get into an Ivy League school. It wasn't easy to get into the Special Forces. It wasn't easy to get into the Department of State. I did all those things, and I honor my commitments. But let me also talk about why I'm motivated to do this. And while I have not previously held elected office, I have been involved politically for the last 5 years, including as chair of my local committee. And in all of those thousands of doors that I've been to, I kept hearing the same message, which is a loss of faith in democracy and people no longer believing that government could get the job done. So the reason why I decided to run was to accomplish 2 things. First, to get Congress back to work, and second, to make the economy work for all. Because as we see, the continuing pull of almost half of America in the direction of autocracy, I've asked, why? Why is this happening? But it's a sense of disenfranchisement, disempowerment, and anxiety. So the fix to preserving our democracy is to make sure that our democracy works. Last year, The House only passed 27 bills at a time when we needed urgent action, both on our foreign policy and our policy at home, including the southern border. If we make government work again and make the economy work for all, we can accomplish that. Thank you.
All right, next we're moving on to Elizabeth Guzman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would start by saying that by serving 6 years, full terms in the General Assembly in the House of Delegates, I delivered in every promise that I made to you. When I was elected, I said we will fight to increase the minimum wage. We did it. When I said I would fight for paid sick leave because it wasn't fair that 1.2 million Virginians had no access to paid time off, I introduced that bill every year. I said I will increase early childhood education programs. I did it. I would say I will conduct a study to see the feasibility of Metro to come into Prince William County, because while we are the second largest locality, we lack a robust public transportation system. I did it. The study is ready and is in need of champions in transportation to deliver on that promise in Prince William County in Washington, D.C. I will also say when we talk about mental health, I said we will decrease the caseloads for school counselors. I did it. Not only high school, but elementary school and middle school. And this was extremely important because after you are elected, and I was not on the ballot in November, however, I could say proudly that I have campaigned for every elected official who's sitting on this table. I've never sit on the sidelines. I've always used my ability, not only as an activist and elected official, but my ability to speak another language to inspire other voters to participate in the process. And that coalition, team, player mentality is the one that I will bring to represent you in Washington, D.C., to help Democrats get elected up and down the ballots in the 11 localities in Congressional District 7.
Thank you. And candidate Eugene Vindman.
So in the military, we have an expression that goes something like, we train to standard, not to time. And we've talked about a number of things that are really problematic in this country, how we're off track in some areas. And so it's going to take some time to fix a number of these issues. The economy, frankly, is going to probably be a multi-year project, and this administration is on the right track with a number of things, like fighting antitrust, fighting corporations, eliminating rules that prevent people from finding great jobs. So I commit to staying as long as it takes to fix some of these problems. But I also served 25 years in the Army. I think my wife has given me only so much time that I can devote to this particular pursuit. So I think somewhere around 3 or 4 terms is about what I am allowed at this point. We'll see if she changes her mind. I have to take off in a few minutes because I have a couple of prior engagements. I thank you for your attentions, and I'll leave you with this with my remaining time. As we approach early voting next week, and we're about 50 days from the election, I encourage you to look at the record of the candidates, the experience of the candidates at the federal level with these issues, the resources that the candidates bring. I'm the only Democrat that has been able to outraise a Republican, and I've done it by 3 times. And frankly, I'm the only Democrat that's built the team and the type of organization necessary to hold a seat. It's critically important that we do that. And I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, thank you, and thank you, candidate Vindman, for participating. We do appreciate it. We've got one more candidate to answer that question, and it's candidate Carl Bedell.
Could you just repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, why should voters trust that you will not vacate the office at the first opportunity? And if it is absolutely necessary for you to vacate the seat, what is your plan for ensuring that your promises are delivered?
So as we all know, this is a 2-year term. The next presidential election is for 4 years, so I'll stick around. It's a joke. I think it's really important that we do have leaders that do what they say and are who they say they're going to be. I don't have any previous political experience. I've served the country, I've served our community, I've never run for office before, but when I look at Congress and I see that the average tenure of a congressperson is 6.8 years, and as Cliff mentioned, last year they were able to pass 27 laws. That's historically low. I don't think that legislative experience actually equates to effectiveness. And I think what's more important is that we have leaders in Congress that uphold the values and the characters that we all should deserve and demand of our elected officials. And namely, that's honesty and integrity. We have to have people that have that beyond all else. And that's what I am. As a former Army officer, as a counterintelligence special agent, held top secret security clearance for almost 15 years. As a lawyer, I voluntarily choose to live by, professionally and personally, under a code of ethics that is stringent. We need people in Congress that represent our country that are willing to uphold those standards, that are willing to go get things done, and beyond all else, make sure that they put the people of our country before any politics. That is who I am, and that's why I'm running for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth Bedell. The next topic is going to be protecting Social Security and Medicare. And because everyone else hears the question first, I'm going to let Andrea Bailey know that she's going to be the first one answering this question. It's, are Social Security and Medicare working for older Americans? If not, how would you fix that?
Well, I'm very proud to say that I am the recipient as a child of Social Security and Medicare, and I didn't turn out too bad. And I want to say that I would absolutely support the continuation of Social Security and Medicare and an improvement of legislation of both. Because I think that that is an arm and a tool to maintain older Americans in our country who are not old, but very young and engaged. And so we have to protect the future of our citizens in this country. But I think that we live by very old legislation. And I think that it needs to be improved. I think that the cap needs to be improved. And I think that everybody needs to contribute to that tool. And I think big business needs to contribute to that tool. And I think that when you talk about Social Security, there are programs that needs to be reformed in the Social Security process. So that's an opportunity as I go to Congress to sit down and look at this legislation and see how it benefits not just for the old, but for the young as well. Because I think that is the foundation for our country that we've lived by for years, that needs to be sustained, that needs to be improved, that needs to be funded more. I think that it's imperative that we do that. And so I would absolutely support legislation in that regard, maintaining it, but reforming it.
Thank you, Supervisor. Candidate Carl Bedell.
So Social Security is a social contract that our government has signed with our entire population, and we need to make sure that that is funded. We need to stop borrowing from it and not paying it back. We need that. In our society today, where people are not doing what they need to do to save for retirement, we have to make sure that the government is stepping in to help those who need help the most. When we talk about Medicare, Medicaid, that's really a broader issue, and that impacts our whole healthcare industry. Our healthcare industry is failing us. We spend more in our nation on healthcare than the third largest economy in the world, which is Japan. So we spend more per person overall than any other country than their entire gross domestic product. And yet we don't have a healthcare system that makes sure that everyone receives the healthcare they need. We have to address that. The federal government, Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, and VA CHAMPS, is responsible for over 40% of our whole healthcare industry. We have a huge ability to affect the industry from a federal standpoint, and we need to do that. We need to address insurance companies that are more interested in profit than results, and we need to look at big pharma and make sure that Americans are not paying more for prescription drugs than our neighbors up north in Canada or the Europeans. We have 20 prescription drugs. If you look at them, and Americans pay 4 times more than those other countries. That's ridiculous. We have to address that, and the federal level, we need to start passing legislation that addresses both the insurance industry, the healthcare industry, insurance industry, and big pharma.
Thank you, Candidate Bedell. Candidate Briana Sewell.
Can you restate the question?
It was about Social Security and Medicare. Are Social Security and Medicare working for older Americans? If not, how would you fix them?
So Social Security and Medicare are working for older Americans, and the problem is we just haven't thought about the solvency for it to work for my generation. And that's where we find ourselves in a predicament, where we are currently at a place where, for instance, Medicare Advantage, which is being worked on in a bipartisan fashion in the House and in the Senate, currently serves, as far as Medicare is concerned, serves over 66 million individuals. That being said, it has a 10-year of insolvency. And we need to be mindful that if it's not corrected in very short order, there will be no Medicare in the future. Same can be said about Social Security. We recognize that the cap currently on taxes is at $168,600, excuse me. And as a result, there are so many opportunities for us to provide additional funding into this, and it's impacting our national debt. And we know that once you remove the Great Recession and our federal response to the global pandemic, which equated to about 90% of the debt funding at this moment in time, this is the next big issue. And unless we come up with a way to control this and address it, we're gonna find ourselves without a Social Security program in place for my generation.
Thank you, Delegate Sewell. Candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Sure. So I think that in Prince William County, we already pushed back the MAGA Republicans that are trying to attack our Social Security and Medicare. But now we have to escalate up our game. As a representative of this seat that includes 11 localities, we need to bring that people involvement, try to expand opportunities for people to participate in the process so they can join us. And that we already in Prince William County rejected Trump, rejected Youngkin, and we need to move that strategy. And as far as Medicare, I've talked about this, the amount of money that Americans spend on healthcare, it's higher than any country in the world. And why? Because even though we are the leader in the country, we don't offer a program that is for everybody. So as your representative, I will fight for a single-payer system that will provide healthcare for everyone. We have to push again the privatization of Medicare. Medicare, we don't need Medicare Advantage, and that's the new terminology that Republicans are using to get, to just affect our access to Medicare. And as it was mentioned earlier, I also believe that, everybody needs to pay their fair share, so we need to remove the cap so everybody contributes to Social Security number so we can save it for the generations to come. So there's not deductions for the top 1%. Everybody pays their share to Social Security. And one final point is that for military families and veterans, when they retire and if they are not at that age that they could receive Medicare, they have to pay out of pocket for their benefits for TRICARE. And that's something that I will fight tooth and nail in Washington, D.C. That is shameful, and we should provide healthcare for our veterans, paying for TRICARE regardless of their age.
Thank you. Candidate Margaret Franklin.
Sure, yes, thank you. Republicans have been trying to cut Medicare and Medicaid for years and have been trying to privatize Social Security for years. I am against doing both. We absolutely need to make sure that we have the resources in place to actually expand Medicare and Medicaid and make sure that those individuals, particularly within those vulnerable populations, have adequate access. With regards to Social Security, we've seen recently that the Republican Study Committee, which is the main policy arm of the Republican Party in Congress, have introduced measures to actually reduce and cut Social Security. And so we need to make sure that we're putting in place provisions that protect Social Security, particularly as one of my colleagues mentioned for this current generation, as we will eventually see some type of cliff where we have to make some decisions. But privatizing Social Security is not the answer, and reducing access to the resources given by Medicare and Medicaid is certainly not the answer.
Thank you, Supervisor Frank. Candidate Clifford Heinzer.
We all know that the Republicans are looking to eventually curtail all of the benefits that we get now from Social Security and Medicare. And we also know that these systems work. The fact that tens of millions of Americans who are of retirement age are not in poverty is thanks to Social Security. That they have reliable health care is thanks to Medicare. And we can, despite all of the Republican propaganda, that we'll have to raise the age at which you become eligible for Social Security. We're going to have to reduce benefits. The fix is obvious and simple, which is we need to remove the cap, which is currently at $168,600, and then that issue will go away. Medicare is more complex because of the cost of health care in the US. And we have to remember, not only do we have the highest cost of health care, ours is over $12,000, almost $13,000 per capita. The next closest nation is Germany, probably around $7,000. But the point is, we have the most expensive care, but we don't get the best outcomes. We have lower life expectancy, higher maternal mortality, higher or worse outcomes actually across a range of chronic diseases than healthcare systems that cost much less. So what is the path forward? It is, and as an initial step, Medicare X and spreading the benefits of the Medicare system throughout our healthcare system. Remember that for every dollar that we put in to insurance premiums for healthcare, we only get 60 cents back. For Medicare, the overhead is 3%, so for every dollar put in, it's 97 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're getting close to the end here. I feel like we've been here for a while. We have like 3 more questions, so thank you to our audience for hanging in. These are all important issues. We want to get to them all, but our next question has to do with public education. And the question is that, we all know there's a shortage of certified teachers, and that has resulted in our schools having to hire less qualified, sometimes teachers, substitutes to fill in the gaps. And we're wondering, what are your ideas for how Congress can support the training, hiring, and retention of highly qualified educators? And for this question, the candidate who will answer first is Elizabeth Guzman.
So what we did in Richmond is that created a program that will borrow money to teachers as long with a commitment that they will teach in Virginia. And that's something that we could do. Many times our teachers have to get into student loan, and then when they are going to repay their debt, they just don't make, they don't make enough to pay for all of the cost of living. So we have to pay them more, and that's something that we have the federal government could help to provide those resources, because we need to value our teachers, but we need to expand more opportunities to create programs for teachers so it could be an attractive job for younger generations. It is sad to see as a mother of 3 Generation Cs, and they have this passion, I want to be a teacher, but then as an adult behind your mind, you know that they won't make enough. So it is our job as your representatives to fight to provide more resources to see the education field more attractive, but not only stopping at the bachelor level, it has to be at the master's level as well, because once they get another degree, also their salary increase. So we have to support them all the way, because we want our teachers as well to work locally. And what happened is that many teachers come, for example, to Prince William County and get experience for 2 years, but then move to other localities like Fairfax or Loudoun because they are paying them more. So we want to retain our teachers, and the only way is to help them with their education so they can find that career attractive, so they can pay their bills and sustain their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Carl Bedell.
So education is obviously mostly state and local issue, but there are some things at the federal level that we currently do and that we can do better to encourage people to get into education and stay once they're there. The first thing is easy. So currently a teacher can deduct $350 out-of-pocket expenses on their taxes. Most teachers, the average is well over $600 they spend before the classroom, before the first day of the class actually starts. We need to raise that minimum so any out-of-pocket expense is deductible for teachers. I also believe that there should just be a flat-out tax credit that the federal government can offer for any teacher, any educator that works a full school year in our education system. That's an easy thing that the government can do. We need to address student debt, and we need to make programs and promote programs that teachers are qualified for. And so if they teach a certain number of years, we start relieving them of that student debt so they can stay in these jobs. Teacher salaries are obviously low. Virginia is one of the worst states for teacher salaries. These things that we can do at the federal government are small, but it's little incentives that we can do. We have to prioritize our students, our children, because they are the future of our country. So anything that we can do to keep good teachers in schools, we should be doing.
Thank you, and thanks for not taking your whole 2 minutes. That's great. Okay, moving on, candidate Margaret Franklin.
Sure, yes. Well, the first thing is to stop ostracizing our teachers and administrators for just doing their job under the guise of parental rights. When I talk to parents across this district, particularly here in Prince William County, they want the same things that teachers want, which is to make sure that their children are being taught math, science, reading, the core issues, and instead of just talking about banning books. Teachers just want to make sure that they have the resources to get through the school day. So that's the first thing we can do, make sure that our teachers and administrators feel respected. Number two, obviously I sit on the Board of Supervisors. It's our job to give our school system their budget and to make sure that they are fully funded. And we've done our job. We've given them over the past several years millions and millions, getting close to the tune of $1 billion in resources. But quite frankly, localities can't do it alone. So we need Congress to make sure that they're passing their budget, that they're passing appropriation measures, that are putting funding and resources into K-12 education, and making sure that when those resources go to the state, that they are getting to those localities in a timely manner. We have a lot of Title I students here in Prince William County. They need to make sure that they're getting the resources they need. We have a lot of students with accessibility needs, and they need to make sure that they're getting the resources they need. And through COVID, we saw that there were a lot of challenges with technology. So it's important that the localities have the resources they need in order to adequately teach our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Briana Sewell.
Thank you. So first off, I'll start out talking about what I've already done to try to address our teacher shortage here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I serve as the chair of the Higher Education Committee on the House Education Committee. And one area that I've worked on very diligently is to take a JLARC study, which is a statewide study that is nonpartisan, completely conducted by policy experts to identify many of the factors which impact our teacher shortage. And while we recognize that this is not only a Virginia problem, but a national problem, one area that we address that is specific to Virginia is we have the VCLA exam. So that's the Virginia Communication and Literacy Assessment. So this exam is on top of proxies and other tests, and it's prevented teachers from entering into the classroom, especially diversifying the classroom, as we've noticed that it has been a significant hindrance for Black and Brown potential educators. On top of that, we have provided significant increases in school funding. For too long, we have noticed that our schools are woefully underfunded here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And while that is primarily a focus of the state level, that alleviates the federal government to be able to promote student achievement and ensure all educational opportunity in a timely and equal and accessible manner. And part of that is something that we try to work on here at the state level through, which I want to give great praise to Senator McPike. He led on trying to provide a 1% tax rate for any locality who wished to take it on to provide the necessary infrastructure changes to our school learning environments, as we recognize that that is a teacher's work environment and our students' learning setting. And that is an opportunity for the federal government to intervene and to be able to provide that assistance.
Thank you. And next we're going to candidate Clifford Heinzer.
I think the question is what, as members of Congress, we can do at the federal level to help overcome all of the challenges that we're seeing right now in our schools. And the number one thing, and I'm again informed by the memory that when I was, there was a time, a few decades ago when I was in high school, but the federal government paid 12 cents on the dollar for my education. So the first step that I think we can do at the federal level is restore the federal funding that flows directly to districts. And there's an important reason for this. If you want to look at a school system that works really well and produces equitable outcomes without regard to the socioeconomic status of the children, look at the DoD system. But you know what the difference in the DoD system? They invest twice as much. Per pupil spending is around $25,000. That's twice what you see in Stafford and Spotsylvania. The thing that they achieve, though, we could achieve also if we provide sufficient support to our schools. But there will be more required because those children in the DoD school system not only benefit from a good school system in which teachers are appropriately compensated. I'm not talking about a small increase. They can get as much as $90,000 where in Stafford we're opening at $50,000. But the other thing is they're not contending with issues over access to medical care, dental care, or even whether or not they're coming to school hungry. We have to address all of these issues if we're going to take on the challenges that our children are seeing every day in the schools. And I have two in Stafford right now, and I can say I'm just as concerned as everyone in the room is about what we need to do to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you very much. This is an area where I think Congress needs to refocus and reinvest. I'm very proud to sit before you as a refocus and reinvest student of the public school system. If it wasn't for my second grade teacher that saw the promise in me, I would not be sitting before you today. And what that looks like from Congress to me is this. Number one, we need to really focus on the salaries and the education, the credentials that our teachers and our administrators bring to the table. And make sure that we acknowledge that, but not make it hard for them to get those credentials, come into the classroom and teach our students. And so we need to pay them accordingly. We also need to reinvest in housing. What does that look like for our administrators and our teachers? Have affordable housing that they can afford, or workforce housing that they can afford from the federal level so that they can come and feel like they're providing for their families. The other thing is, when you talk about student loans, I've never experienced as a college student the type of burden that our students are having now. So we need to look at that again legislatively and revamp that because it's too much, basically just too much. And then when we talk about the hunger issue that we have in our country today, kids are coming to school hungry, going home hungry because their parents cannot feed them. So we need to look at what the programs look like in terms of food insecurity. How do we, from a federal level, make sure that this country is enriched with a student that can be refocused and reinvested in our communities, healthy, not hungry? Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bailey. The next topic is going to be kitchen table economics, protecting jobs and wages. And candidate Carl Bedell, you'll be the first one to answer. I just want to remind you, Prince William County Dems have asked very detailed questions about this for the purpose of this 2-minute answer. I'm going to specialize in one part of it, but we welcome your candidate and your campaign to respond to it in full with any other questions we've gotten today in the forum, and we'll be publicizing those just like we're publicizing this forum. So the question for now, for your 2 minutes, is specifically on kitchen table issues, is the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. The minimum wage in Virginia is 12, and as we know, Governor Youngkin just vetoed a bill to increase it an hour. What do you believe is a livable wage, and how will you work to achieve it at the federal level?
Okay. This is a tough question. A livable wage is definitely more than what the federal minimum wage provides. And a livable wage differs across our country and certainly across our district. I lived in the DC area for 19 years. I understand how expensive it can be. And I now live in Greene County where the cost of living is significantly less. And so I'm not sure that there is one livable wage that we can really push on the nation. We have to do more to make sure that people can get jobs. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is we need to focus on making sure that individuals who are leaving industries, whether it's because the industry is starting to become unimportant or jobs are dying, are able to retrain so they can get jobs that are paying them a minimum wage, or a livable wage, excuse me. I think it's for the sake of time, I don't know the answer to that question. I will do some research and I can put some things on my website, but I don't know statistically or a number that would answer that question.
Thank you. And candidate Bedell. The next person to answer is candidate Briana Sewell.
And can you restate the question?
Sure. It's the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. The minimum wage in Virginia is $12 an hour. And no thanks to Governor Youngkin, it won't be increasing anytime soon. What do you believe is a livable wage, and how would you work to achieve it at the federal level?
Well, I can tell you what a livable wage is not, and that is our federal standard. I proudly cast my vote at the state level to ensure that we continue to increase our minimum wage, to ensure that individuals have a roof over their head, food on their table, access to affordable quality health care, and hopefully just one job to pay for it all. And that's currently not what we're experiencing. And when I think about the 7th congressional district, it's not simply how much they get paid, it's also their ability to take time off. And that's time off to care for themselves and their loved ones. And something that I was proud to champion in the General Assembly is paid family medical leave, which we were able to pass for the first time through the General Assembly's both chambers. And despite the governor's veto, I think with a different governor, that process would have looked a little different. We have been able to showcase what is possible when you invest in our hardworking families. We brought chambers to the table, we brought business to the table, we brought healthcare professionals to the table, and we brought workers to the table to establish a piece of policy that was pro-business, pro-worker, pro-family, and ensures the health and well-being of our residents. And that's something that the residents of the 7th district will get when I go to Congress as I continue to fight for you.
Thank you, Delegate Sewell. The next candidate is candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you for that question. I want to just say that there is a woman that lives in Prince William County. Her name is Lillian Garland. Lillian Garland was very instrumental in helping to craft the FMLA legislation. She is my friend. She is invested in our country. And when I talk to her in the past, there are certain things that she talks about that I believe in when you talk about a minimum wage. You cannot just craft it with a number. You know, I can say $15 to $17 an hour. I started out as a kid, $3.10 an hour, so that's big to me. But when you talk about that, you have to have a way for people to support their families. And so for me, what that looks like in my experience is being raised in a home where there was a workforce development program in our communities with the labor unions. And I think the labor unions play a big part in how we craft a minimum wage and how we support our families, how we give a trade to a family member so that he or she can support their families. So I think that's very, very key. And I think we've moved away from that. And so when you talk about a minimum wage, it is defined for me having the opportunity for a man or woman to be able to be proud to support their families with a higher level of income that is real, not a facade, that is real. And it's certainly not $7.25.
Thank you, Supervisor Bailey. Next to answer the question is candidate Clifford Heinzer.
As I mentioned before, I grew up in America where working Americans lived to work a living wage. They could earn that in a 40-hour week. We can do that again. But we have to remember how that was achieved. And almost all of the blue-collar workers on my street were members of organized labor. Organized labor has been under attack for 40 years in this country. The service industry, it's very weak. But a recent vote that we saw in Memphis tells us that organized labor can come back. With regard to the specifics of what we need to do in terms of where the wage is, I can tell you that the federal minimum wage is far below where it needs to be, and I would advocate for increasing the minimum wage to $17 an hour by 2028. But beyond that, we have to support the same things that will create an environment conducive to workers earning a living wage. That means not pursuing a trade policy which disadvantages U.S. workers. That means making sure that our immigration supports our economy, but does not undermine workers. That also means that we have to provide access to job training and to education so that workers can enter the market with the skills they need. I would also add, and I want everyone to think about this, that there is a huge challenge coming our way for all workers, blue collar, white collar alike, which is the impact of artificial intelligence. It's already here, but we're only now beginning to see the effects, and we better have a good plan ready, or we're going to find, once again, as we did with the first automation revolution, tens of millions of Americans unemployed. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Heinzer. Candidate Margaret Franklin.
Sure, yes, thank you. I've been supportive of the Fight for 15, so I think at the very least we need to be pushing for at least a $15 minimum wage. And quite frankly, we ought to be working with our small businesses to help them achieve that for their employees, because what we found is obviously, I believe that public sector should be providing at least 15. Companies can do at least 15, but our small businesses oftentimes have challenges with their workforce, and so we ought to be providing incentives and resources for them to get to at least 15. So I thank my colleague here for throwing out a number, because I think it is possible, and I think that we can work with various industries to get to that floor. So I support at least $15.
Thank you, Supervisor Franklin. Candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Well, how would I get it done in Washington, D.C.? The same way that I did it in Richmond. When I was elected, the minimum wage was $7.25. And I did it by sharing my personal story, having 3 jobs to qualify a 1-bedroom apartment. And I had this conversation, and I will call her out, Miss Lily Jesse, who's here with us today. We had a conversation once of why parents don't show up to parent meetings and why they are not present in their children's lives. And the reason is because they needed to have multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. But what is and I am the only candidate who has been endorsed by labor here on this race, including the Virginia AFL-CIO. And when we are talking, what are the consequences? So when we look at the federal poverty law, is what it's looked at in order to get access to early childhood education programs like Head Start, is what is used to get access to Medicaid, is what is used to get school-free lunches. So when you have 2 minimum wage jobs, even if they are $7.25, you are ineligible to any of those programs. And we know that having two jobs at $7.25 doesn't make it here in Virginia. So we need to expand it, and we need to include our farm workers as well. Virginia, when Democrats were in control with a trifecta, were #1 for business. But the #1 business industry is the agribusiness industry, and it was due to the farmers. So when we are looking at increases of the minimum wage, we cannot leave our farm workers behind, and that's something that I've been fighting in Richmond as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We're getting down to our second to last question. This topic is immigration. And the question, well, Asim has been telling you who's going to answer it first, and I keep forgetting to do that. So I will say that the candidate that's going to get this question first is Elizabeth Guzman. And the question's about it's about immigration. And here it is. Knowing that Republicans probably will use immigration as a wedge issue in the November election, if you are the Democratic nominee, how will you address this issue in a way that acknowledges the humanity involved and benefits both the residents of the 7th Congressional District and the nation as a whole? And the first candidate to get this question is candidate Elizabeth Guzman.
Sure, well, as an immigrant myself, I understand the system very well and their consequences. And I would start by addressing the low-hanging fruit. We have seen that there is support in Congress for providing a path to citizenship to farmers, to TPS workers, and dreamers. And to me, that's step one. We have to prove to this country that those who have behaved according to the law, there is a path for them. Because what happens is that we are taking deductions from them, like FICA taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, without them knowing that they will one day have a green card or become citizens. So we are holding that money without giving them that opportunity. So for me, that's step one. The second idea that I support is what it was presented from the Senate that will increase. Let's be clear that the reason that we are in the chaos that we are today is because of former President Trump. He was intentional by defunding the Department of Homeland Security, including ICE, to create this chaos. So we need to give more money so those applications of those who are crossing the border with applications that are eligible for asylees and refugees, we need to provide the resources so those applications could be processed in a timely manner. And once we accomplish, and there is one more that was presented last week, which is parole in place. If you are married with a citizen, but you cross the border illegally, currently you cannot become a green card holder or become a legal alien in this country. So that's something that we need to fix, and I will support the parole in place. And the last step is an immigration reform for those who behave according to the law, because this country needs to take responsibility.
Thank you so much. The next candidate is candidate Briana Sewell.
Thank you. The last time that comprehensive immigration reform was enacted was almost 40 years ago, and there have been two efforts since then. One under George Bush, and then the other time under former President Obama. And we know that with that case, Speaker Boehner refused to let it come to the House floor for a vote. So while this is a wedge issue, it didn't have to be, and we just saw that again this past fall. Where the Senate was able to pass bipartisan legislation that the House refused to hear, and that the House refused to approve. That was a bill that would focus on border security, but it also failed to offer a pathway to citizenship to include for dreamers. Now, what Republicans are excited by is H.R. 2, which, to say it mildly, includes the reimplementation of Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, which the name in itself is offensive. It reduced opportunities and grounds for asylum, and it encouraged the continued construction of the border wall. So again, there are opportunities for us to work together to empower our communities, to celebrate our diversity, but we're not afforded those opportunities in Congress, and I look forward to being able to work with a bipartisan Congress that looks a little different and has a very different attitude about this.
Thank you. Candidate Andrea Bailey.
Thank you. This is a place where I think the dysfunctionality has made us lose our way. And what I mean by that is that we are the United States of America. People come to America like people come to Prince William County because they want to be here. They want the American dream. And so what that looks like for me as I go to Congress is to support and to enhance a comprehensive immigration package. When people come here, they need to be educated and provided for to help them learn their way. And so when we don't do that as the United States of America, then we are not supporting and respecting humanity. For me, that's the bottom line. And so I look at it as we've made a promise to DACA and TPS, and we need to really sustain that promise. And no human is illegal. I just look at it like that. And so just having a comprehensive immigration package that we live by is very important. When I go to the ceremonies at the Hilton Performing Arts Center, when people are becoming U.S. citizens, we let their hands go. And we should not. That's across our nation. We should not. They want to live here just like those of us that were born here. It's an imperative that we show them how.
Candidate Margaret Franklin.
Yes, thank you for that. I've said this on record many times before that I believe in a comprehensive immigration package. We've seen it before. We've seen the Gang of Six in the past. Both Democrats and Republicans come together and put together a good measure that could have been moved forward, and obviously they didn't. And so we need to get back to the table, and we need to put together a comprehensive package that can move forward. I'll also just say that I represent one of the largest immigrant communities here in Prince William County, and the communities that I represent span from those from El Salvador to those from Sub-Saharan Africa. And so when we talk about immigration, these individuals want to be here. They came from areas that may have been gang-ridden, that may have been economically disabled, and they are here because they want a better way of life. And quite frankly, those who are undocumented want to be in the light. They want to pay taxes. They want to be part of our economic system, and they just want the opportunity to do so. We need a system that is not terribly expensive for people to become documented. We need a system that is easily to navigate through, and all of those things have to be part of any comprehensive immigration reform package. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have candidate Carl Bedell.
So I absolutely agree we need immigration reform. Whether you're a first generation American or your family came over on the Mayflower, we have to remember that we are a nation of immigrants. Very, very few people were born here, and we have to wholeheartedly accept that and make sure that we have a process to identify bad actors if they're coming across the border and prevent that from happening, but improve the efficiencies of the immigration system so that people that are coming here for the right reasons can get through that system and can be productive citizens in our society. We have to have that. When you look at our district and you go out and you talk to farmers, immigration is not an issue. They need more workers. We need the immigration system to work better so we can have people that are willing to do the jobs in our farms that Americans are not willing to do right now. We need that. We need to improve the visa system so we can get people here to do those jobs. And that's very impactful on our society and on our district.
Thank you. Finally, candidate Clifford Heinzer.
The challenge that we have is not that we have a problem with our immigration system, it's that we have two of them. And I know that because as a consular officer, I've personally issued tens of thousands of immigrant visas. I was also the U.S. border coordinator in Afghanistan. But if my spouse wanted to bring, she's in the back, if she wanted to bring her siblings here legally tomorrow, they wouldn't get an interview for 15 years. Our current lawful system is not equitable because it's very difficult if you're coming from some parts of the world, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia. It's very difficult just to get here. Our solution does not have to mean engaging in xenophobia. But our second system, in which we have essentially delegated management of immigration to an organized crime cartel, that is not an answer, and we can secure our border. What we need to do is to create one system that is timely, not overly expensive, and allows equal opportunity to people globally who want to come here. The long-term solution, though, to the challenges we're seeing on the southern border is not a fix of the immigration system, is to fix the problems in those nations from which people are seeking to escape. And there's a very good reason why they would want to come to the US. But we're talking about hundreds of millions, maybe even over 1 billion people who would, and it'd be entirely rational. But the fix for us is to engage in the long-term development to make those nations work better. Not to try to somehow put a Band-Aid on an illegal immigration system that's not working well for the US. And we can support employers and immigrants with one system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we're at the time where we're coming for closing remarks, so each one of you will have 2 minutes. However, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty on behalf of Unity for the Prince William County Democratic Party, and speaking on behalf of all the other counties and the Democratic counties in your District 7. In your closing remarks, which will be begun by Elizabeth Guzman, candidate Elizabeth Guzman, I'm going to throw in a little curveball, if you can add it within your 2 minutes. If you are not successful in the June primary, how? I don't just need a raise of hand, but how will you support the candidate that will be chosen as the Democratic nominee for CD7?
Well, thank you so much, Prince William County Democrats, for having me here today. It is, you probably seen, thank you for allowing us to share our vision to represent this district. You probably see that there are very few differences. We almost align in most of the Democratic values. However, it is important to mention that I am the candidate who have proven that can win competitive seats, as I did it in 2017 by double digits, and I was able to get reelected 2 times. And how did I do it? And I pledge to do it for whoever is the nominee, by engaging those voters that were disenfranchised of the process. I speak Spanish. The district is 18% Spanish speaking, and I pledge to get those voters out to be able to keep this Congressional District 7, as I did it for the candidates that are represented in Prince William County. I am the only candidate who have represented rural areas, and this district is 35% rural. And we need to run 2 different campaigns. I know because I did it, and that's how I believe my district. I'm the only candidate who have local and national endorsements running for Congress. So I am ready to be your voice in Washington, D.C., to fight for healthcare for all, including abortion care. I am ready to fight for common sense gun reform because I am a mother demanding action. And I would like to fight for a better public education system because everyone should get access to a world-class public education regardless of your zip code. I'm ready to fight for an economy that works for everyone. And I believe that it is time that we bring the diversity of our Prince William County to Washington, D.C. by electing the first Latina to represent Virginia in Congress. Thank you so much, Prince William County Democrats. And I have to leave. Today is my daughter and my husband's birthday. So I'm sorry I have to leave now, but thank you so much for organizing this event. I appreciate it.
Feliz cumpleaños. Thank you, Delegate Guzman. Next will be candidate Margaret Franklin.